Well, the parental
Sort
care
of.
of dinosaurs, yes. Alright. 1 second. Let me get the slideshow up. Alright. There we go. Hello, I'm Michael Cohen. I'm going to be talking to you today about egg laying and parental care in dinosaurs. So, this is a very broad topic, so I'm going to be focusing on 3 specific examples on the dinosaur family tree. In the Ornithischia, we have Maiasaura, which is a pretty famous example, so kind of can't not include it. And then on our theropod side of things, we have Troodon, and we have Oviraptor. So let's start with Maiasaura. In 1979, a massive assemblage of dinosaurs and dinosaur eggs was discovered in this remote part of Montana. They called the site Egg Mountain because it was just covered in all of these eggs and nests. They were like scattered around the place everywhere. So most of them come from this hadrosaur called Maiasaura pueblosaurus. Maiasaura literally translates to good mother lizard. So here you can see a whole bunch of them protecting their eggs. They have the nest and they're looking at the hatchlings and all. It's a nice little illustration. So from this site, we can tell that they lived in large herds of all ages and sizes. They grew up rapidly in their first year of life, but they had a long adolescence. And if we put all this information together, this seems to indicate that they have something called altricial behavior. Altricial behavior is where an animal takes care of its young. So usually, takes care of the eggs and takes care of its young after birth. So, yeah, the opposite of this is... slides just start being... No. Sorry about that. The opposite of this is precocial behavior, which is where basically you lay the eggs and run and hope that whatever happens to the eggs happens and that some of them make it to adulthood and have eggs of their own. So, yeah, also at Egg Mountain, there were some other nests nearby, and these nests were initially attributed to ornithopods, but they were later found to be of this small theropod called Troodon. And Troodon, you might have heard of them before. They're more famous for having these large brains and big eyes, sort of like night hunting versions of raptors. They're kind of their less famous cousins, is how I like to think of them. So these guys have these nest impressions, and we can see that they had these round bowl-shaped depressions that were about 1 meter wide on average. And they have these eggs that stand up inside the nest. And it seems like the Troodon would have brooded over its eggs and protected them, kept them warm. As you can see, this is kind of an older version of it because there's no feathers on the Troodon, so you can kind of tell it's a bit dated. But all right, so these eggs are elongate and aspherical, which just means that they're round. They're not perfectly circular or spherical. They're rounded. So the shape of an egg actually is determined by the path it takes through the oviduct. So the tract to get from the ovaries to the cloaca. So the more complicated this path, generally the more elongate and aspherical the egg is. This is a feature that is common in modern day birds. So now let's talk about Oviraptor. So Oviraptor was discovered in Mongolia in the 1920s, and they were considered, when they were found on top of these nests, right? So it was assumed that basically they were caught in the act of stealing the eggs from the nests, and there were all these ceratopsian dinosaurs everywhere. So it was assumed by the scientists working there, Roy Chapman Andrews, who's a pretty famous paleontologist, and there's a lot of cool stories about him, but I won't get into that here. He believed that basically these dinosaurs were going around and stealing the eggs and eating them, and that they were getting caught in the act of doing this. So they named the species Oviraptor phyloceratops, which literally translates to the egg thief that loves ceratopsians. So, yeah, so here's the reconstruction from like the 1950s. The upright, scaly dinosaur that has this funky nose horn and is stealing the eggs. So, yeah. And of course, so then our knowledge really kind of stopped there because the Cold War happened and nothing really happened, at least in the West, with Mongolia and paleontology for many years. So in the 1990s, the Mongolia reopens to the West, and the American Museum of Natural History, where Roy Chapman Andrews worked, starts sending expeditions there again. And they find, if you noticed my very first slide, the intro slide, they found that specimen. It's called Big Mama, because you see that the Oviraptor, let's see if it's not too much trouble, I can go back to it. Yeah. You see that it's like sitting over it and it's protecting these eggs. And you can also see that, and if you open up these eggs, you can see that they have little oviraptors inside, not protoceratops. So this tells us that instead of being these thieves, they were actually devoted parents, and they were trying to protect their eggs, even up to the moment they died. And that's sort of one of the more modern reconstructions on this side, where we have it brooding over the eggs. So, all of the adaptations that I've discussed today, the nests, the altricial behaviors, the brooding, all of this exists today in modern dinosaurs, or birds. So, like you can see here in this wonderful photograph from my own backyard. So, yeah, and this is why the study of dinosaurs and the study of paleontology is still important to us. It's that you can see the past is the key to the present. And with that, here are my citations, and I will take any questions you might have, or if you just want to hear stories about Roy Chapman Andrews, that's fine too.
Okay. Let's see, Mike.
And thank you for listening.
What questions do we have?
Noah.
So I have two, and they're both about the name Oviraptor Proceratops.
Philoceratops, yeah.
Hyloceratops. Okay. So the first question is, its name still means egg thief, and there's no way to change that.
Yep, unless like it was unless they discovered that it's actually a separate species or something, then it's just gonna keep the name Oviraptor. Though, there are other species of Oviraptorosaurs, which the entire group gets named egg thieves. But what are you gonna do? But yeah, there's like Psittipati. There's a couple of other different species.
My second question was, why is its second name Lover of Ceratopsids?
Well, like I said, it has the there's all these Protoceratops skeletons everywhere, so they assumed that those nests were Protoceratops nests, so they figured that basically it predated predominantly on Protoceratops. So they figured.
So it says Ceratopsian lovers, it means lovers of their eggs.
Yes, it loves. Yes, it's a stealer of eggs who loves Ceratopsian eggs. Yes. It was quite a clever name, although inaccurate. Ashley?
Okay, what's your favorite Roy Chapman Andrews story?
Oh, that's gonna be a tough one. I have two. Probably the first one is that when he was just starting out as a paleontologist, even before he was a paleontologist, he like just came out of college and he wanted to be a paleontologist. So he goes to New York and he goes to the AMH and they're like, we don't have any jobs in paleontology right now. So he asks like, well, what jobs do you have? And they say, well, we have janitors. I mean, you can sweep the floors, but you're a college graduate. Why do you want to sweep the floors? So he says, I don't care. They're museum floors. They're floors where there are dinosaurs. Just give me a job. So he gets the job, and eventually he works his way up to being like their best paleontologist. They love him there. They still have like photos of him on the walls and stuff. So,
I'm
Uh,
not gonna lie, that's a very good tale, and more Kat would agree. Probably, we still do that today. What can I do at your museum? I will eventually get to where I want to be.
Yep.
Yeah.
Although keep in mind, like he was a college graduate when he did this, so he didn't just show up at the museum and expect to work his way up to being a curator.
He was
Like, he
eventually
had
the
background,
director.
There was just no job.
Yeah. He eventually becomes the director of the entire museum, so I'd say he worked his way up pretty well.
Big glow up.
Yeah. The other story is that this one's probably more common. That basically, when they were out in the field in Mongolia, they ran out of burlap and they ran out of plaster, so they needed something. So they used whatever they had. So there are still specimens in the museum somewhere. The story goes that have Roy Chapman Andrews pajamas on them as the cast to protect it. Yeah, the jacket.
It looks like Caleb has a question.
Yeah. Sorry, I can't see the entire thing, so I'm probably missing you.
You said a lot about Oviraptor, not like in the instance that a lot. Is there any evidence that Oviraptor actually was an egg thief, like other than the nest?
That is a good question. I'm not 100% sure. I mean, you could say that like the beak does seem to be good for like piercing things, which would be good if like you're trying to break open an eggshell. I mean, there's that. Also, they have these sort of grasping hands, so yeah, that could also be interpreted that way. But it's more like they were just like predating smaller animals and lizards and things that were around in the Gobi Desert. One of the craziest things about Mongolia is that in most of these environments that you're going to be hearing about, there were different environments. Like the Hell Creek is now like Badlands, and 65 million years ago it was this wetland swamp area. But Mongolia has basically just always been a desert. So these guys were running around the Gobi millions of years ago, and we're digging them up in the Gobi now.
Yeah, and you're right, Mike. So when we look at the beak, things that have, so for being a theropod, it doesn't have well-developed big teeth like we think of theropods having. Rather, it's relying on its beak. And when we see that, eggs are a really good, nutrient-dense, rich source of food that don't require teeth. And that sort of leads us to believe that eggs could be a part of its diet.
Any other questions?
I have a question for you.
Oh, uh-oh.
What famous character from pop culture, from the movies, is Roy Chapman Andrews, like, what does who is based on him?
Yes. Yep, that would be Indiana Jones, surprisingly enough. They changed him from a paleontologist to an archaeologist, but if you look, the hat, the persona, that kind of stuff is basically just ripped off of Roy Chapman Andrews. Though I don't believe Roy Chapman Andrews carried around a bullet. So.
No, I think that's specifically for Indiana Jones, but the whole look.
Yeah.
Very much Roy Chapman Andrews.
Is this why we're confusing paleontology and archaeology so
Probably.
much?
This does not help.
It doesn't help, no.
The genesis of it.
The guy also had a pet vulture.
That I didn't know. But why not? Who
Yeah.
doesn't want a pet vulture?
Exactly.
Let us thank Mike.
Thank you.
Right. And if I am not mistaken, let me just look at my schedule here. I think what we need to do is we are going to take another break because you guys have been sitting a while. You've been staring at a screen for a while.
Sorry, what did
You need to get up. You probably need to eat something.
Needed those forelimbs.
So we have run a little bit longer. Margie, when do you say we reconvene?